Reading from the Gospel according to John. At that time, the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple, in the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus replied, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe, because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." Christ is risen.
Christ is risen indeed.
Many wonderful things that I have learned and experienced in Ohio. One of them just was recently, I once again got the Ohio blessing, that people, pass by me and generally honk their horn and raise their hand and bless me, because I'm staying under the speed limit or something like that, or decided to pause at a yield sign because this other car was not going to yield, and, I just didn't like to have a wreck. But one of the fun things was in one of my rural areas that I was a minister, I had kids that were active in 4-H. Got any 4-H? Some hands there. Yes, 4-Hers. Great. Well, I'm a city boy. That's foreign to me. My daddy did like to garden, but I'd rather be beaten to go to the garden or to mow grass. That's just, it was my form of rebellion. But when I had kids in my church, there were 4-Hers, and they were going to the county fair and going to be showing their animals. I said, okay. Okay, now, there was a little subtle reason I wanted to go. It's called corn dogs, cotton candy, caramel apples. What? Fried stuff? Oh, fried dough, yeah. Anything fried, a fried Snickers, So, that was an encouragement. So I had to go to the shed where they were showing animals because I had these two sisters. One of them, the year before, had been grand champion. Her animals, she did cows, steers, whatever. Kill me how much I know. So I was there, but it was neat to see the art of them showing the animals, and the judge would be walking around and he would just have these subtle hand gestures, and the kid would turn the cow around, and so I watched all these different animals, and I wish my two girls had been doing sheep, because that would just help me with this, but no, they had some form of beef up there. And so it was a neat experience to be there. The closest I've ever come to animals outside of a cat and dog is the time that a live chicken ended up in our front yard. Now, if you don't know, I'm from Gainesville, Georgia. That is the chicken capital of the world. And at noon on WGGA, you can get the poultry report. You'll know exactly how many chickens have been slaughtered that day. The poultry report. And so it was very common to see trucks going by carrying chickens. And every once in a while, a chicken get loose, and we came home, and there was a chicken in our front yard. So Daddy decided it was going to be education time. So I do know what happens when a chicken's head's cut off. Of course, I'd already named it. The chicken had only been in the yard for 10 minutes, and I'd already named it and everything. And so it was several weeks later that during a Sunday lunch that we realized that I was eating Gertrude, So, but that was my only experience with animals. And so I have to rely on great information, the internet that gives us all kinds of, so what are sheep all about? Let's think about the characteristics. There's a long list. Sheep are normally very timid, fearful, and they're easily panicked, okay? And they're gullible. They're also very vulnerable to fear, frustration, pest, and hunger. They're easily influenced by the leader. They can stampede in a heartbeat, and they're vulnerable to the mob or the crowd mentality. They have little defense mechanisms. Basically, the only thing they know what to do is to run. They can easily be killed by their enemies. Now, the shepherd is most effective in keeping them calm. They're also very jealous and competitive. They love fresh water and the fresh pastures. They have very little discernment in choosing food or water. Their best water source, anybody know what that is? I was amazed. The dew on the grass. Licking off the dew off of grass. They're stubborn. They insist their own ways. They'll even eat poisoning plants and dirty water. They can easily be cast. Anybody know what that means? To cast a sheep? That's to throw them on their back. When they get flipped over, because once they get flipped over, they can't get back up. Can't straighten up, sort of like a turtle. They're helpless in that sense. They love to find the easy place to rest. They don't like to be sheared or cleansed. Of course, the wool can easily help them to be cast. They love the ruts. They love that path that they've always taken. They take the most care of all livestock. They need to be moved. They need to have a pattern of grazing. And they're totally dependent on the shepherd. And they need the rod and the staff. Know any people like that? For a while, going like, oh yeah, that's brother so-and-so, and that's sister so-and-so, pointing my finger, they're like that. The scary thing is, the older I get, the more I realize I like those ruts. Sort of nice to be doing the same thing. We get to that tradition. So maybe there was a good reason that the psalmist of old in the Hebrew canon chose that image of the shepherd. Of course, we have a great change of the shepherd. Because, King David was a shepherd boy, and that was praised. But by the time Jesus was being born, shepherds were the of the earth. They were not thought of. They were on the low pole of status. But it's interesting that our images that we love about the Good Shepherd. Now, our tradition in our building, we don't have stained glass windows. But I have a deep suspicion, if we did, we'd have a window to the Good Shepherd, wouldn't you think? You may have grown up in a church. I was shocked at one of my churches that I had. We had two beautiful stained glass windows. One was of the resurrection or the empty tomb, and the other one was Gethsemane. And I said, well, if we had a third one, it probably would be the Good Shepherd. That image is just there. When I was in Athens, Greece on a Sunday, I wanted to go to church, but the closest English-speaking church that I could figure out was too far away. I didn't think I could manage, didn't really want to venture out that far. And so I went to a museum. It was a Byzantine and Christian museum, and I got to see statues of the Good Shepherd, 1,000 years old. That image is there in paintings that we see, such beauty about the shepherd. But let's look at what the story says in John's Gospel. But my sheep hear my voice. My sheep hear my voice. So often we may hear the voice, but do we really pay attention to the voice? I realize that we do love our statement, God is still speaking. I've sometimes wondered if we're willing to listen to what God is saying. And goes on to say, I know them and they follow me. They pay attention to the shepherd. And I give them eternal life and they will never perish. And no one will snatch them out of my hand. When I read that, I thought about a certain theological belief. Anybody in this room know what apostasy is? Did I hear Where? You know what apostasy is? Right. The idea is that you can fall from grace. Okay? There's certain people who believe that the problem with the term is a Greek term, and it has an image, and it's a hot iron against a piece of leather. Now, when you put a hot iron to a piece of leather, what happens? It burns through, can't be reconnected. It can't be fused back. You can't fuse leather back. So that's where that terminology comes from. And there are certain people who believe in apostasy. I want my people to be educated. Please don't go running out there and going like, our interim believes in apostasy. No. Because it goes on to say that what God holds, we can't be snatched away from. Because I think when you come around to apostasy, we get in this judgment issue. Who's in and who's out. I think I'm not God, and I don't have to know or worry about who's in and who's out. My job is to call love. Get around to loving people, accepting what is going on, and leave that to God. For God really does hold us and loves us. And that image is such power to know and to rest. In my last interim, this woman showed up at my church unannounced. She just said, I need to talk. And so she came we started talking. She had lost her husband. In fact, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the death of her husband. And she was in such pain. And trying to work with her and to help her to understand about resting and knowing that she sits in God's hands. To know that no matter what happens in our life, that we're tended to. Just like good old sheep. So maybe that old spiritual song, He's got the whole world in His hands. 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 That's sweet. Isn't that sweet? To know that we rest in God. And nothing can snatch us away